You're looking at ordinary Italians reacting to the execution of Benito Mussolini. Their hatred and vengeful celebration was on public display, and international coverage didn't hold back. This obituary, broadcast just days later, didn't dwell on legacy or last words. It dismissed any pretense of honor and made clear what his death meant to the world.
Before the bayonets of the Allies deflated this false prophet. He was captured once before and rescued by German paratroops. This time he had no such chance. Partisans tried him along with his sweetheart and several henchmen. Just as these pictures show the trial previously of other key fascists and collaborators. He was brought before a firing squad, and in this manner he died as tyrants should, and was hung up by his heels. A fitting and glorious end.
Shocking, isn't it? How did it come to this? That a man who ruled Italy for over 20 years, commanded the loyalty of millions, styled himself Il Duce, the leader, the myth, the voice of a nation, now finds himself hunched in the back of a German truck, wearing a borrowed coat, hiding beneath a steel helmet, running for his life. This was no ordinary man. He was the architect of fascism, the master of propaganda, the dictator who once stood on balconies, declaring Italy's imperial destiny to roaring crowds. This was Benito Mussolini. To understand the collapse, you have to see what held it together. Mussolini built the image of power, and while the state itself was dysfunctional, it was largely a performance, and every performance has a beginning. Benito Mussolini rose from the ashes of World War I. In the early 1920s, Italy was fractured, humiliated by losses, paralyzed by fear, and economically ravaged. Mussolini saw opportunity. In 1922, supported by his band of enforcers, the Black Shirts, he staged the March on Rome, a theatrical show of force that pressured the king to appoint him prime minister. It wasn't just a coup, it was a performance. By 1925, he had dismantled Italy's democracy and declared himself Il Duce, the leader. His regime ran on violence and illusion to control the population. The Black Shirts beat and intimidated political opponents. He staged grand parades in Rome and Naples with columns of Black Shirts, tanks, and banners flooding the streets. The slogans were everywhere, painted on buildings, chanted in schools: credere, obbedire, combattere, believe, obey, fight. Tutto nello Stato, niente al di fuori dello Stato. Everything in the state, nothing outside the state. Viva il Duce, long live the leader. Mussolini didn't just direct the spectacle, he controlled every scene. He censored newspapers, banned opposition parties, and filled classrooms with fascist slogans. His face was on posters, his voice on radio. Even sports events were staged to glorify him. Behind the scenes, Italy's economy was faltering. Mussolini's corporatist model gave the state control over industries, but it rewarded loyalty over competence. Factories were inefficient, and by the time war broke out, Italy was unprepared, underpowered, overextended, and deeply in debt. Mussolini's alliance with Hitler only made things worse. He adopted racial laws in 1938, targeting Jewish Italians to mirror Nazi policy. Italy joined the war in 1940. It lost battles in Greece, North Africa, and Russia. Cities were bombed, food vanished, and the public, once mesmerized, turned bitter. In July 1943, the fascist Grand Council voted him out. The king dismissed him, and the man who once ruled through spectacle was now a prisoner in his own country. After his arrest in July 1943, Mussolini was held in a remote hotel in the Apennine Mountains. 2 months later, German commandos rescued him in a raid ordered by Hitler. He was flown to northern Italy and placed in charge of the Italian Social Republic, a puppet government based in Salo. The new regime had no real independence. Nazi Germany controlled the territory, the military, and the decisions. Mussolini had no real power. Under German supervision, the Salo government began collaborating in the deportation of Italian Jews. Between late 1943 and 1945, over 7,600 were sent to Nazi death camps. Most were transported through transit camps like Fossoli and Bolzano. The majority were murdered at Auschwitz. The regime also intensified its crackdown on resistance. Fascist police carried out arrests, torture, and executions. Partisan groups responded with sabotage and targeted attacks. Italy was divided, violent, and exhausted. By April 1945, Allied forces were advancing from the south. German troops were retreating, and Mussolini was on the run. On April 25, 1945, Mussolini sat down with leaders of the Italian resistance in Milan. They gave him a clear ultimatum: surrender unconditionally. He refused, but the uprising had already begun. Partisans were seizing control of Milan, Turin, Genoa. The streets were turning against him. And Mussolini knew, if he stayed, he wouldn't be captured by the Allies. He'd be taken by Italians who wanted him dead. Mussolini fled Milan under cover of night. He headed north to Como, hoping to reach Switzerland before the partisans caught up. But the resistance was already closing in, and every move he made only narrowed his options. On April 26, Mussolini left Como in a German convoy, telling his SS escort he was heading for Murano. But his real plan was to cross into Switzerland. The Germans weren't fooled. His escort had orders: get him to Germany alive, or leave him dead in Italy. From Como, Mussolini kept moving. Grandola, Moltrasio, Bonzanigo, each stop more desperate than the last. His mistress Claretta Petacci had joined him, part of an entourage of over 100 people, trying to blend in as part of a retreating German convoy. But the partisans were watching. On April 27th, near Dongo, they stopped the convoy. They searched the trucks, letting the Germans pass. But every Italian was pulled aside and searched. Inside one truck, they found suitcases stuffed with cash, gold, and documents. And then they found him, slumped behind the cab, disguised in a German Luftwaffe coat and helmet, wedged between two German officers. Meanwhile, in Milan, the resistance had already sentenced Mussolini to death. Then came a telegram from Allied High Command. All fascist officials were to be handed over, but they weren't about to do that. What if he was spared? So they simply lied and said Mussolini was already dead. That lie gave them time to make it true. After his capture, Mussolini and Claretta Petacci were taken to a farmhouse in Bonzanigo, a quiet hamlet near Mezzegra on Lake Como. It was a temporary holding site, remote, discreet, and controlled by local partisans. But even in custody, his fate wasn't secure. The next morning, two representatives from the Como CLN arrived with orders to transfer Mussolini alive. They were part of a different partisan faction, aligned with the surrender agreement. Walter Audicio, a trusted partisan commander, already acting on orders to carry out the sentence, saw them as a threat, so he had them arrested. He wasn't taking any chances. Determined to see the plan through and avoid any further disruption, Audicio told Mussolini and Petacci they were being moved to Milan. Instead, he drove them to Villa Belmonte in Giuliano di Mezzegra. In the garden by a stone wall, he told them to stop and stand together. Then he stepped back to carry out the sentence. But what followed didn't quite go according to plan. According to his account, he raised his submachine gun and fired, but the weapon jammed. He cleared it, raised the gun again, and fired the fatal shot himself. Other versions differ. Some say Audicio's weapon failed, and Lampredi stepped in. His gun jammed too. Then Moretti, the third partisan present, used a functioning submachine gun. He fired. Mussolini collapsed. Either way, Petacci screamed and threw herself onto Mussolini's body. She was shot and fell beside him. Lampredi then cleared his pistol and fired a final shot into Mussolini's chest, aimed at the heart. The time was 4:10 p.m. Leaving the bodies piled in a heap, Audicio, Lampredi, and Moretti returned to Dongo to oversee the fate of 15 other fascists, also slated for execution. By 6 p.m., the execution was complete in Dongo. Their bodies were loaded onto a truck, and later the corpses of Mussolini and Petacci were loaded along with them. That night, the truck headed south toward Milan. It arrived before dawn, pulling into Piazzale Loreto, a wide open square in the heart of the city. Just 8 months earlier, 15 partisans had been executed there by fascist forces under German orders. Their bodies were left on display for days. Now the symbolism was unmistakable. The corpses of Mussolini, his mistress, and his fascist loyalists were unloaded and unceremoniously left on the cobblestones. Word spread quickly. By mid-morning, a crowd had gathered. Some came to see. Others came to settle scores. They brutally mutilated the corpses, kicking, spitting, and urinating on them. One woman fired 5 bullets into Mussolini's body, one for each of her sons killed in the war. Partisans tried to control the crowd, first with water hoses, then with warning shots fired into the air. But it was no use. The square had filled too quickly. People were angry, volatile, impossible to contain. The bodies were eventually hoisted upside down from a steel girder at the nearby gas station to give the crowd a better view and further humiliate the dead fascists. It turned the square into a stage, the same kind of stage Mussolini had once commanded, now repurposed for his final act. In the end, it was the crowd that had the last word. And if the stage looks familiar today, it's because we recognize the opening acts of a tragedy we've seen before. We know where this road can lead, and the pendulum is already in motion.